Hi there, my name is Kite. My pronouns are they, them. And I'm a yoga teacher based in Middlesbrough in the northeast of England. And I run a Kika community interest company, which is like a social enterprise called Queer Yoga North. So we have a community of people who are doing well-being activities, not actually just yoga, but we've got like Tai Chi and strength-based training. And we're funded by organisations like Sport England, and it's really about helping people to just feel better in themselves.
Amazing. And so, what was your journey to finding yoga and then becoming a yoga teacher working with queer people? Like, how did you end up on that path?
So I discovered yoga when I was living in Thailand. Maybe it's a bit of a cliche. Had a bit of like a eat, pray, love kind of moment, and ended up traveling for about 10 years. And I started yoga partly because I found seated meditation actually quite hard. I wanted to do seated meditation, but my head felt so busy all the time. And I found yoga easier because often the focus in yoga classes is movement, and I found movement as like a movement based meditation was more accessible for me. And so that's how I kind of got into it. And then when I moved back to the UK, I did my teacher training in York and in the north of England. And I hadn't like anticipated setting up queer yoga classes, but I really started to find it harder when I came out as non-binary, and I found it difficult, some of the gendered kind of aspects of attending yoga classes. Often there are like a kind of gendered language like used in classes, and I found that kind of tricky for myself personally. So I wanted to kind of set up the classes really that I would have liked to attend. And that's kind of how I got thinking about queer yoga. At the time, I was running a queer book club, and I just asked people like, oh, do you want to do some yoga? And we did a yoga session on the beach for the summer solstice, and people asked, oh, could we continue doing queer yoga classes? And there was something really magical about coming together as a group of queer people and kind of sharing that space together, knowing that people, although they come with their completely different like lived experiences and intersecting identities, there was some kind of thread that united us as queer people. And I guess a lot of us have mental health issues. You know, our community is really like disproportionately impacted by mental health. And so being in that space and knowing that you felt held by the other people in the room, there was something really special about that. And it kind of grew out of that, really.
That's really beautiful. And it's interesting as well, like we were talking a little bit before about accessibility and making yoga more accessible. And you said how actually that is kind of the queer part of queer yoga is more about the accessibility and the inclusivity. And so I
Mm.
wondered if you could speak a little bit about some of the some of the ways that you can make yoga really accessible actually, because so many people hear the word yoga and say I'm not flexible enough or feel really disconnected and like they can't do it. So I wondered if you could
Mm.
share a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so for me, like if it's not accessible, then it's not really yoga, because really the whole point of yoga is to actually develop a relationship with yourself. So the whole point is that you become your own best teacher, because you learn to know what it is that you need and to hear that inner voice that can communicate to you what you need, and then you become better placed to actually serve your own needs and look after yourself. And so it makes me really sad when people feel that like yoga isn't for them, because the whole point of it is that it is unique and individual. But I just sometimes feel that doesn't come across necessarily in some classes in kind of the West, where if you've got kind of these really dynamic, fast-paced classes that aren't accessible, where people's needs are not considered, then people can feel that that it's not for them. And actually, when you consider some of the history around yoga, there's a really important figure, for example, Iyengar, who's considered like the kind of father of modern yoga. He used loads of props, which is things like chairs and stools and blocks and bolsters and cushions. He used all of those to help people access the body in different ways, to get a different perspective on what it means to like be an embodied human, to like live in this reality. And when you use kind of props like that, you can change the shapes and the postures. And unfortunately, somehow some people have this notion that using a prop like a chair somehow means that it's like not as good or something like that, and it's actually not true at all. I think it's probably just the case that a lot of studios are in the space actually for all the props, but when you get all these props out, it can really help to people to access the poses in a way that is best suited for themselves. So to my mind, the yoga classes are about giving people the options to learn how to choose them things like a block or a bolster that might help them to adapt. And actually, I don't even like the word adapt, really, just to do the pose the way that they want.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and that kind of brings me to thinking that by being able to use props, you're, for one thing, grounded because you're locating yourself in an environment and using the resources you have available. And you're also letting yourself be supported by your environment instead of feeling like you have to do everything yourself. Which then brings me on to the class that you're doing for us is about belonging. And I know that you've created lots of different classes with these different themes. And so, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your workshop you're doing for us and how yoga can create that sense of belonging for
Mm.
ourselves and a community?
Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me to like share the gifts of yoga through your platform. It's really lovely to be able to reach out to other LGBTQI plus people, and to make people feel that they belong in their own skin, in their own bodies, in this moment right now, and within our community, even as we're connected virtually, so we can feel that kind of energetic exchange. What I would say is that yoga isn't just about movement. So the eight limb path is the kind of comes from an ancient text called the Yoga Sutras, which lays out what yoga is. And asana is the movement, and that's one part of yoga. But there's loads of other parts to yoga, which is to do with like mindfulness and meditation and being present. And belonging in a yogic sense is about really coming into this present moment and being here. And I think that actually queer people are pretty good at that, because actually what we're saying is, this is me, like, and this is who I am now. And we're already celebrating who we are in this moment rather than trying to necessarily be somebody else. So we already have that. It's the world that sometimes the outside world can make that difficult for us. But so this yoga practice is about drawing on all the tools of yoga, not just movement, and finding your own way to celebrate you in this present moment. And if you want to come along and do the session and do no movement whatsoever, that's totally cool. And actually, I would applaud you for that, because I think it's a brave choice. And I've seen people come to my classes, lie down and be like, actually, I'm knackered and I'm going to just lie here and listen. And I think that's fab to have that courage. And I only see that in queer classes. I don't see that happen so much in other classes that I teach. And I think that's because actually a lot of us have got incredible courage.
That's amazing. And final question, what would be your greatest dream of what you could give to the queer community in terms of like emotion, in terms of energy? Like, what would be your ideal outcome for people who are working with you or coming to your classes or sharing in what you do?
Oh, what a gorgeous question. Um, do you know, in the end, I have to be totally honest. I think that the way that I teach yoga is I'm trying to convey really what it is that I need. Sometimes I'm talking to myself,
Mm.
actually. And what I've always worked on is wanting to be grounded, but also to be able to ground in order to celebrate and fly, so that you can fly high from a really rooted place. So I want our community to be seen and to be celebrated, but to do that from a place of grounding, which for me also means belonging. Because if you're not sure, how you belong in the world, it's hard to feel rooted and grounded. And I think that kind of balance between those two qualities is what I'm constantly searching for in my yoga practice. So then in the end, that's what I end up teaching.
I love that. Yeah, and it's so often the case that the thing that you give is the thing that you're really trying to give to yourself, but you give it to other people in the process.
And in the process learn loads, and it can be such a healing experience. I guess you'll know that too.
Yeah, healing the microcosm and the macrocosm, I guess, at the same time. Oh, thank you so much for your time. And we're so excited to have your workshop in January. Oh, would you like to share your where people can find you, your Instagram or your website?
Yeah, thank you so much. On Instagram, we're at Queer Yoga North, and it's queeryoganorth.com. So yeah, just get in touch. Thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity. It's lovely. I love the project. Love everything that you're doing.